I'm Jake,
I'm Tom.
and we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music. Today we're going to do The King is Dead, a 2011 release here, just happened a couple days ago, by the Decemberists. The Decemberists, if you haven't heard of them, well, clearly you don't talk to me enough, because I love the Decemberists. They're one of my favorite bands, if not my favorite band next to Radiohead. I think M. Ward's up there too. I like the whole folky, poppy thing that's going on there. And after the 2009 release of The Hazards of Love, which is by far, I think now, my favorite album I've ever listened to, just in terms of just what they were trying to accomplish, how they went about doing it, and then just the execution of just perfect songwriting, instrumentation, all of the above. I mean, everything about that album to me is just flawless, and the whole experience is just quite moving. So coming off of this monumental album that really caused a rift in fans.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people didn't get it. They didn't like it. They didn't realize there was this huge concept behind it and a story. And I mean, it was a rock opera. I mean, I went and saw them live, and they played the whole thing straight through.
Yeah,
I mean,
which is really the only way you can listen to
right.
that.
I mean, they brought in guest artists to play throughout it, and they toured with those guest artists. I mean, it was an intense experience. So coming off of that now, 2 years later, they already have this new album out, and they're on Capitol Records. And Capitol, generally, artists on Capitol take numerous years in between albums. They have big tours, big production, and that's not the case here with the Decemberists, which is pretty cool. But they kind of scaled their sound back. Now this album focuses more on kind of a folky alt-country aspect. The accordion that you're typically used to has dropped lower into the production mix. I mean, what you hear now is you hear steel guitar and some
harmonica.
Harmonica, yeah. There's a lot of Dylan. I get a lot of REM in this too. But Tom, what you feeling on The King is Dead?
Well, definitely compared to the rest of the discography, I'm going to quote a friend of mine, Mal. She's been on the show for Bell and Sebastian before. We were talking about this album, and I think she summed it up perfectly when she said that compared to Hazards of Love in particular, you know, being a concept album, this album, more so than probably any Decemberists album, especially coming out of Hazards of Love, is so much more about the individual tracks.
Right.
Now, there's definitely a cohesive sound, but it mostly comes from the production is just so good and so consistent throughout. But really, this album is more about, oh, there's a good song. Oh, there's a good song. Oh, there's a good song. They don't have as much to do with each other. The exceptions being, I'd say, January Hymn and June Hymn, obviously, in the titles. But really, I think that Colin Meloy is one of the only people that could get away with something like this. So much of a drop in ambition of the sound and complexity, just because he's such a damn good songwriter. And these are damn well-written songs. Now, I'll admit, by the end of it, I get a little tired of the sound. I would have liked to hear a little more, but there's just so many good things to say about it that doesn't really bother me too much. Especially one thing I want to point out is that I feel like Colin Meloy's vocals have just matured. He's not quite as whiny and nasally as he once was. I feel like he can really get some of that oomph behind his voice that he has always had a little bit, but not quite as much as I would have liked.
Yeah, it's definitely a more matured sound. And one thing that, you know, I felt kind of the same way as the album moved through. I felt like the songs got a little bit predictable, just in the fact that what they're using is that Justin Bieber verse chorus format that I always criticize on, and it does get a little taxing. Even the Decemberists with their crazy and very robust songwriting. When a band does that, you know, 10 tracks in a row, by the end of it, it's a formula. You're done with it. And I feel like a little bit of that is present here, and that's my biggest criticism of this album. I do think that that's kind of part and parcel with the style that the Decemberists were going for on this album, which is just that, you know, very simplistic folk country vibe. That's what they wanted to present here, and I feel like they did a very good job. You know, I think the lyrics and the Decemberists are always something that you have to look at as just something that really adds to the music, and I think that if you don't notice the lyrics, if they're not enhancing the sound, then they're fine. And if they're ruining the sound, if they're actually detracting from your listening experience, then that's bad. But if they're enhancing your listening experience, you gotta point them out. And in this, and in every Decemberist album I've ever listened to, I love the lyrics. I do.
It's interesting though, because the lyrics are good on this album in a very different way. I think they serve a different function than most other Decemberist albums, because that storytelling element is not nearly as present here.
Right.
Everything, I mean, even like Crane Wife, which wasn't a concept album.
But there's mini stories.
Oh yeah, I mean, Shankill Butchers, stuff like that. Almost every track on that album told some sort of story, even if they weren't relevant to each other track by track all the time, like they were on Hazards of Love. And you get that on pretty much every Decemberist album, but it's not as much here. It's more just, lyrics to fit the mood, to convey an idea.
Right, and they're very crafted to make you think a certain way about the song, which I find to be, if you're going to make a song and you have this end goal in mind, then you should plan out how you want these things to occur, what you want to put into the song to make that end effect happen. And I think the Decemberists accomplished that well. That's just good songwriting.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, I feel like it's strong, but it's nothing fantastic. I think the most amazing thing about The King Is Dead is the fact that the Decemberists were able to scale back their sound, go back to their roots, coming off of this gigantic, ambitious, just monolith of an album, and they're able to still expand their arsenal of different styles that they're doing. They're expanding their sound while still contracting their sound. How do you do that? How do you do that? That's why I love the Decemberists, and that's why they're one of my favorite bands.
And I think any other band that tried to make the move that they made with this album, it would have just been death for them. But it worked for these guys just because they're so good.
Tom, what are you giving this one?
I am going to go ahead and say 78.
78? I'm going to go 79. I feel like this is strong. It's on the cusp of being in that really good 80s range. And maybe if they would have done maybe a little bit more and gotten away from that song structures, I would have pushed it up there. But just in scope, I mean, I just don't feel like it's quite as strong enough to be in that upper 80s range. Yeah. It's not like they were going for something that was super, super ambitious. It's just a scaled back good album. And a scaled back good album to me should be right around an 80. That's it. That's The King Is Dead, 2011 from the Decemberists. I love those guys. I can't wait to see them live again. I'm taking you with me this time.
I will go. Happily.
Guys, tell us what you think about the Decemberists. Did you like the Hazards of... not the Hazards of Love. Did you like The King Is Dead in comparison to the Hazards of Love? What's your whole take on where the Decemberists are going with their sound? We want your comment. www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. I am Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.